We are still looking at this category of cut-through. The three basic elements that we said pertain to such a scenario is that there is a stationary vehicle, another vehicle cutting across the path of that stationary vehicle at right angles to the stationary vehicle, and then thirdly, that vehicle that's cutting across the path of the stationary then collides with another vehicle traveling in one of the adjacent lanes to that stationary vehicle. In the previous video, we had a look at vehicles doing so coming from the opposite side of the road. So that is relative to the stationary vehicle. So in the previous video, it would have been vehicles coming from the opposite side of the road. In this video, we're having a look at vehicles that originate from the same side of the road that the stationary vehicle is on. In this animation, we'll see that the driver of this red vehicle pulls out, cuts across the path of the yellow stationary vehicle, and then collides with the green vehicle traveling in the same direction. Real life clip, which shows what we've seen in the animation. In fact, this is the very same area that was depicted in the animation. I've taken the coordinates here and used that as the satellite image in which to create the animation. So here we see that exact same scenario. In the next real life clip, we have a vehicle that's entering from the side road. So it could be either a vehicle, as we saw in the previous clip, where it originates on the same side of the road as the stationary vehicle. In that case, it was from a parked position. Here we're looking at a vehicle that crosses the path of a stationary vehicle that's entering from a side road into the main lanes. So there's element one, stationary vehicle. This vehicle that's entering from the side road. Now notice that when this driver pulls across, even though once this vehicle is passed and the white vehicle now proceeds further, note that he doesn't even observe the presence of the white vehicle. And you see that he doesn't slow down in order to try and avoid a collision. He doesn't notice him at all, and one can deduce that from the fact that he actually accelerates all the way through to impact. So the point of this clip is for us never to assume that drivers are going to do the correct thing. This driver would have thought that it's quite evident that he would have been noticeable, and yet the driver was not looking directly ahead of him. I don't know where his attention was focused, but it was obvious that that was the case because he just accelerated straight into this driver. So we always have to be cautious, never just assume anything on the road. In this next clip, I've included it because we've got that same scenario. We have stationary vehicles on the opposite side of the road. We have a vehicle cutting across the path of the stationary vehicle, originating from the same side of the road as the stationary vehicle, and then vehicles traveling in an adjacent lane that vehicle then collides with. So there we go, stationary vehicle, vehicle cutting across the path, and this vehicle lands up colliding with the camera. So just a couple of points from each driver's perspective. From the camera's perspective, first of all, when we're traveling along a line of traffic like this, we always want to make sure that we're at the furthest point of danger in the event that a vehicle suddenly shoots out into our lane. So it would have been best for the camera to travel in the right-hand lane, because then you would have been furthest from that point of danger. So if there's another lane, then travel in the furthest lane from that point of danger. If it was a single lane, then try and travel to the far side of that lane so that you once again as far as you can be from the point of danger. From the driver's perspective, it would have been very difficult for him, because of the presence of these vehicles, to have any sort of visibility of vehicles traveling down the lane. He should have been alerted to the fact that there are vehicles moving down the lane because of the presence of these vehicles that had passed in front of him. But if you're in a situation like this and you cannot see any oncoming traffic, the best thing to do is to try to gain the attention of the vehicle that's waiting just on the other side of the gap. So if you can gain that driver's attention and through hand signals indicate for him to actually check to see if there are any oncoming vehicles, and then to let you know whether it's safe for you to cross or to hang on until it's safe, and then he can indicate to you, and then you know it's safer to be able to move into the lane on the opposite side of the road. Yeah, we've got a similar situation to what we had in the previous clip, a line of traffic. And so when we're traveling down alongside such a line of traffic, always be in expectation that a vehicle is suddenly going to shoot out. So once again, it would have been safer for the camera to move over onto the right-hand side of the road, although it's not divided into lanes, but it would have been safer to move further from this point where a vehicle might suddenly shoot out. So bear that in mind, just to repeat the point from the previous clip. But I've included this clip for another reason as well, and that is to make sure that when you're driving, not to just look straight ahead of you. One needs to train oneself to be able to look to the side of the line of sight directly ahead of us. So we try and use our peripheral vision to see any movement that might be taking place on the side here, because that would alert us to any vehicles wanting to shoot through a gap. And that's exactly what we see. If the camera had been more alert to that, he could have taken evasive action. So notice there, this truck was already visible. Let's just go back a section. And just to a point here. So there, if he had used his peripheral vision, he would have seen this white blob, and that it's in motion, actually moving in the direction onto his side of the road. But he was oblivious to that, so not paying attention to any peripheral activity, and so suffered the consequences. The point here again, just to repeat, try and train ourselves to use that peripheral vision. Look out for anything such as motion, shadows, lights, anything that would indicate a vehicle that we cannot see directly, and that would alert us to that vehicle's presence. In this clip, I've included it because in the previous clips we discussed a vehicle originating on the same side of a stationary vehicle, same side of the road, either from a parking spot or from a side entrance. However, in this clip, it's neither a parking spot or a side entrance. We find that it's a vehicle traveling in the lane on the far side. So a vehicle traveling in that lane suddenly decides to shoot through the gap onto the opposite side of the road. So the point here is that if we don't see any side roads, we don't see any parking spaces on the opposite side of the road, doesn't mean that a vehicle still won't shoot through the gap onto our side of the road. So we could still have that very same cut-through scenario, even if there are only two lanes of traffic. I've included this clip, which is the last instructional video, just to show speed differential again, and to highlight the importance of maintaining a lower speed differential. So if you haven't seen any of my previous videos discussing speed differential, what is meant by speed differential is the speed of a vehicle relative to the speed of another vehicle. So in this lane, we've got a number of vehicles traveling a lot slower or even stationary. And so any vehicle coming down the left lane here wants to make sure that their speed is not too high. In other words, their speed too high relative to the speed of the vehicles in this lane of traffic. Because the higher our speed differential, the greater the risk we stand of colliding with a vehicle that would then cut through this lane of traffic. And that's exactly what happens here. You see that this vehicle passing on the left side here is traveling far too quickly for any such line of vehicles. So you notice that he slammed on brakes, skidded, but for a fair distance directly into the vehicle that was crossing over the road. And so the speed differential principle applies to any scenario where we find that we're traveling too fast relative to vehicles that are in the adjacent lane. And if we're ever in a situation where we find that that's the case, vehicles are traveling either very slowly or come to a stop, then we want to make sure that our speed is not too high relative to those vehicles. please like, subscribe, and get notified.